On a warm Tuesday morning in St. Augustine, Florida, Emily Carter pulled her old Honda into a small neighborhood garage just before closing time. The engine had been making a terrible noise for days, and now the car had finally stopped on the side of the road. Emily was already worried because she had only a few dollars left in her checking account. The mechanic, Daniel Brooks, listened carefully as Emily explained what happened. He was a quiet man in his early 40s who owned the garage by himself. After inspecting the car, he discovered that the problem was serious enough to require several hours of work. Emily watched nervously as Daniel worked beneath the hood. A few hours later, Daniel wiped his hands and told her the car was ready. Emily took a deep breath and asked how much she owed him. Daniel looked at the receipt before answering. The total was more than she could afford. Emily opened her wallet and counted her money twice, hoping somehow the numbers would change. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't have enough." Daniel noticed the embarrassment in her face. Instead of getting angry, he quietly took the receipt and wrote something on the back. Then he handed it to her with a small smile. Emily looked down and saw the words, "1 cup of coffee. That's all you owe me." She stared at him confused. "Coffee?" Daniel nodded. "There's a little cafe across the street. Get me a coffee someday when you can." Emily couldn't believe it. She thanked him repeatedly, but Daniel simply waved goodbye. She drove away with the receipt sitting carefully on the passenger seat. That night, she placed it inside a small wooden box where she kept things that meant something to her. 3 days later, Emily returned to the garage carrying 2 coffees. Daniel looked surprised when he saw her. "You actually came back." "I said I owed you one," she replied. They sat outside the garage during their break and talked for almost an hour. Emily told him she had recently moved to St. Augustine after losing her job in Jacksonville. She was raising her 8-year-old daughter, Sophie, alone and trying desperately to start over. Daniel listened without interrupting. He understood more than she realized. 2 years earlier, he had lost his wife after a long illness. Since then, he had buried himself in work and rarely allowed anyone close enough to ask how he was doing. Their coffee became a quiet tradition. Every Friday afternoon, Emily stopped by the garage. Sometimes she brought coffee, sometimes homemade cookies, and sometimes nothing at all. Daniel never cared. He simply enjoyed having someone to talk to. Sophie eventually began visiting too. Daniel showed her how engines worked and let her sit in the driver's seat of an old pickup truck behind the garage. For the first time in months, Emily saw her daughter laughing without worrying about their problems. One rainy evening, Emily arrived at the garage, looking devastated. She had just received news that the small apartment she rented was being sold. She had 30 days to move, and she had no idea where they would go. Daniel listened quietly. Then he told her about a small house he owned outside town. It had belonged to his parents and had been empty for years. He offered to let Emily and Sophie stay there while she got back on her feet. Emily immediately shook her head. "You've already done too much." Daniel smiled. "Maybe you haven't noticed, but you've done something for me too." "What?" "You reminded me that life isn't supposed to be lived alone." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She finally understood that the coffee had never really been about payment. Daniel had given her something far more valuable than a repaired car. He had given her dignity when she needed it most. Months passed. Emily found a new job at a local bookstore. Sophie settled into a better school, and Daniel slowly became part of their everyday life. Sunday breakfasts turned into family dinners, and simple conversations became memories they both treasured. One evening, Emily found the original repair receipt inside her wooden box. She brought it to Daniel. "You remember this?" Daniel laughed. "The most expensive cup of coffee I ever asked for." Emily smiled. "It changed my life." Daniel looked at her for a long moment. "Mine too." Then he reached for her hand. Neither of them had expected anything that day when Emily's car broke down. She thought she was receiving a simple act of kindness from a stranger. Daniel thought he was only helping someone who couldn't afford a repair bill. But sometimes life creates unexpected connections in the most ordinary places. Sometimes a broken car leads to a new beginning. Sometimes a cup of coffee becomes the beginning of friendship. And sometimes the greatest debts in life are the ones nobody ever wants repaid.